सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
How do you define politics, particularly Indian politics? Is it a science? Is it a craft? Is it a reality? Is it a state of mind? It is a combination of each one of these. It is ultimately a most unique phenomenon. In fact, more remarkable than the politics you will see in many other democratic countries. Otherwise, how come a phenomenon that changed India's politics permanently? Exactly 25 years ago, how come its 25th anniversary just passed without notice? That happened this Monday on 15th of May. Just passed without any notice. You did not even see any tweets. In fact, I went to Twitter this morning and I hit NDA, National Democratic Alliance, 25 years, 25th anniversary. Nothing showed up. That means the anniversary of the most historic event in our contemporary politics just passed unnoticed. It was on 15th of May 1998 that Atal Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani, Pramod Mahajan, George Fernandes, many of these stalwart leaders, three stalwart leaders, Pramod Mahajan, then a rising, still quite young leader, they got together to set up the National Democratic Alliance. That National Democratic Alliance ruled India for 6 years, almost 6 years, between 1998 to 2004, until it lost power to UPA. Now, this was a result of a couple of things that had happened earlier that I will tell you. But this also established in India for the first time that coalition governments could work, coalition governments could coherent, and coalition governments could last 5 years. Now, look at what had led to the formation of National Democratic Alliance. In 1996, Vajpayee came to power for the first time. He came to power because he and his partners was Samta Party, which later became JDU. George Fernandes' party, Shiromani Akali Dal, Shiv Sena, Haryana Vikas Party was Bansilal's party. All of them got together and together they got 194 seats in 1996, way ahead of Congress and its partners. So they thought, because they were the single largest grouping, they were invited to form a government. They formed a government that lasted exactly 13 days. So Vittal Gadgil or VN Gadgil, who was then the Congress spokesperson, he said famously in his press conference that this is a 10-day wonder, that they've got sworn in, it's a 10-day wonder. They lasted a bit more than that, not exactly 10 days. They lasted 13 days. So a bit more than that, but not much more than that. It was at that point that then leaders of the BJP realized that unless they answered the fundamental problem with their party, which was its untouchability by many other parties in the center or maybe a little bit to the left of center, like say George Fernandes' party, until they could address that, they could never come to power in India. And that is when, because they were stung so badly, losing your government in 13 days, you tasted prime ministership, but you were out in 13 days, they steadfastly started the business of setting up a larger umbrella, big tent coalition, which gave ideology a backseat. So by 1998, they had set up a better coalition. They had got more parties in because they were trying to counter their untouchability. So who were the parties who came in 1998? By February 1998 already, because elections were coming up, and BJP had tailwinds because the coalition that was set up to keep them out of power, that was United Front, first under Gowda, then under Gujral. Each one had lasted a very brief time and the BJP was at their throats all the time. Coalition partners were fighting and everybody knew that there will be elections soon. So BJP started working at it, and also people by and large were now thinking that anti-BJP forces were not able to give a coherent government, particularly as the Congress was staying out of these governments. These coalitions were a case of tail wagging the dog. The dog in that case being the Congress party. This is no insult to anybody. It's just the use of a metaphor, tail wagging a dog. So the coalition that the BJP now built up was expanded from the 4 parties they had earlier. Now they were Shiv Sena, Samta Party, and Akali Dal and Haryana Vikas Party. These were there earlier also in 1996. Now they added Biju Janata Dal, Lok Shakti Party, which was R.K. Hegde's party in Karnataka. Very importantly, in Tamil Nadu, the dominant party at that point, All India Anna DMK, Jayalalitha's party. So 1998, this was the NDA that came into being. This NDA in 1998 election, it won a sufficient number of votes to get very close to power, and because they got support from AIADMK, as I told you just before the elections, they had enough numbers to form a government. They had numbers to form a government. They also won their vote of confidence, and Vajpayee became Prime Minister. That government, however, lasted only 1 year. In 1 year, in almost exactly 1 year, the government fell, and it fell by 1 vote. That's when the voting took place in Parliament, and BJP government, Vajpayee's government, or NDA government, I apologize, I should have said NDA government, it lost 270 to 269. It got 269 votes in Lok Sabha. Those who voted against it were 270, and that's because Jayalalitha's party had pulled out support from the NDA, and Vajpayee again lost power. Now, this happened when the war in Kargil had just started. Now, because the war in Kargil was going on, there was consensus among all parties. That's where I tell you that Indian politicians, with all their flaws, when it comes to the national interest, they get together and they take the right decision. And the president at that point, Rashtrapati, president of great stature, K.R. Narayanan, he then asked Vajpayee government to continue till the war in Kargil was over. And once that was done, India was to hold fresh elections. So that war was handled quite well by the Vajpayee government, a caretaker Vajpayee government, right? A Vajpayee government which had lost majority. That's the beauty of the Indian system. Once that war was over, once Kargil was settled, the issue was over, that is when a fresh election was held. By this time, people had seen that this was quite a coherent government, so they gave it even more seats. This time, the BJP itself got 182 seats, which they had got in the past, but TDP now, which was a partner, got 29, JDU got 21, DMK got 12, Shiv Sena got 15, and BJD, which was also a partner, got 10 seats. You can also take note of the fact that AIA-DMK had walked out and DMK had come in its place. This was a good number. All of this for NDA in the second election. After 1998, NDA's second election was 1999. That is after the government fell after 1 year. That NDA got 303 seats. Does the number ring a bell? That is exactly the number that the BJP got under Narendra Modi in the 2019 election by itself. So BJP got 303, and the NDA, which went to the polls in 2019 together, all of them together got 355 seats. That NDA right now is reduced to 329, whereby lies another fascinating reality of Indian politics that we'll touch upon as we go along. Now, see what the formation of NDA did. Today, we may not remember it very much. Today, it may pass without notice, in fact, without even tweets from senior leaders of the parties that constituted the NDA and still technically continue to constitute the NDA. But here are the 5 things I think that NDA achieved, and I'm listing them. Number 1, NDA convinced Indians that coalitions can work, and even through crisis, because Vajpayee government dealt with multiple crises. The war in Kargil was one, parliament attack and Op Parakram after that, a near war-like situation with Pakistan. It also dealt with the IC-814 Kandahar hijack and many such crises. Also the Tehelka expose. So many such crises this government dealt with and stayed stable. So an experiment, third time successful. First time 13 days, second time 1 year, third time 5 years, maybe a few months less, but that's only because Vajpayee government decided to advance the general elections in 2004. So they proved to people of India that coalitions can work. Now, because they proved it to people of India that coalitions can work, the subsequent coalitions, the 2 UPA coalitions could come into being and also last their full term. So India then had 16 years of uninterrupted coalition rule and quite a coherent coalition rule for both coalitions, NDA as well as UPA. Of course, you could agree with policies of one or the other, or with some policies of one and with some policies of the other, and disagree and vice versa. But the fact is that NDA made that big epochal political change in India, that coalitions can work. Before that, coalition governments were always dismissed as khichdi governments. Mrs. Gandhi, remember, even dismissed the Janata Party, which actually was a full party. So 4 parties, that is the Jan Sangh, the Socialists, Lok Dal, and also the older Congress. They all came together to form the Janata Party as one party. They all coalesced their identities and they said, we are giving up our or any other ideologies. That didn't happen. Janata Party broke up, and so Mrs. Gandhi said that any government like this, which is Jod Tod Ki Sarkar, is a khichdi government. So this khichdi mindset was defied. The second thing that NDA achieved, was that until then, all coalitions were formed on basically negative considerations. So the fuel that drove those coalitions was negative. So some coalitions were formed to keep the Congress out. So VP Singh's coalition, Third Front, that was formed at that point, supported by the BJP and left from outside. That is 1989-1990, not to achieve any ideological objectives, but to keep the Congress and the dynasty out. Similarly, coalitions or the so-called secular coalitions that came in later, the United Front under Gowda and under Gujral, they came in and these were supported by the Congress party from outside. So both sets of coalitions, VP Singh / Chandrasekhar's and now United Fronts with Deve Gowda and Gujral, each one was a case of tail wagging the dog. So the tail was inside the government, dog was outside. In one case, BJP and the left, in the other, the Congress party. You can see how it was driven and joined together with negative considerations of keeping the Congress party out, that the BJP and the left, which ideologically cannot be more distant than any other 2 parties in the country, they made common cause to keep VP Singh's government in power. Similarly, the Congress later joined hands with everybody they disagreed with and everybody they fought with in several states to keep Gowda and Gujral in power. This one, for the first time, was a coalition neither based on an ideology nor against an ideology, or maybe I should phrase it differently. This was a coalition put together, NDA was a coalition put together on no negative consideration. It was not put together to keep somebody out. It was put together to take power because it was seen as an opportunity. And that's why it did not need a negative fuel, because the idea was not to keep somebody out of power. The idea was to get power. For that, what the NDA did was, the BJP, which was the main constituent or the core constituent of the NDA, they decided to sacrifice their own ideological commitments. That is, whatever happened subsequently now with Article 370, or that is the construction of the Ram Temple, Uniform Civil Code, etc. So they said, we leave it for another time, obviously for a time when we have the majority. So once again, the idea that a coalition could survive, the idea that a coalition could be set up not on negative grounds, that a coalition could be for something or somebody, not against something or somebody. And UPA also pretty much followed that pattern. Although later there was a strong motivation to keep the BJP out, but the fact is that it was a left of center coalition. And even the common minimum program that came in, it was left of center. It had a shared ideology of its own, but not a strong ideology, because on the economy, for example, there were wide differences within the Congress party and between the Congress party's leadership of the UPA and many constituent parties. As on foreign policy, we saw subsequently towards the end of the term of UPA 1, the left walking out. Although the left was not formally a part of the UPA, they were supporting it from outside. So that was the one big contribution. Next one, that ideology took a backseat. We explained to you that the initial coalitions in India were formed ideologically to the extent that combine minimalistic ideological commitment of keeping, quote unquote, a communal party out. So to keep the BJP out, you got together. Or again, minimalistic ideological commitment to keep dynastic rule out, the Congress party. So put together a coalition. That's how it had happened earlier. Now this NDA established that, look, you could put ideology on the back burner, put up a government, put together a government and run it. So Vajpayee government, for example, NDA, Defense Ministry was given to George Fernandes, who was not even from BJP. So a key member of the Cabinet Committee on Security was actually a non-BJP member. To that extent, BJP had agreed to submerge its ideology in that NDA for the sake of power. Vajpayee-Advani NDA was in fact such an ideology-free coalition that J&K National Conference, that is the Abdullah family's party, was a member of that coalition, as was Mamata Banerjee's party. Later, both served also as partners in the UPA coalition. You can apply that test also to Ramvilas Paswan and his party. I'm not being judgmental about it. I'm in fact seeing it as a positive thing. Number 3, the willingness to accept a leader from one party by other parties. Now, everybody didn't accept it. Early days of NDA under Vajpayee, there was trouble from Samta party, there was trouble from Jayalalitha's AIA-DMK. There was also trouble from Mamata Banerjee's All India Trinamool Congress. Now Mamata Banerjee and her All India Trinamool Congress, they joined Vajpayee's NDA in 1999. She actually served as rail minister in that cabinet, Vajpayee cabinet. I'm quite sure even she doesn't want to be reminded of it now, given where her politics is. But that's what a wide tent this coalition had become. As I told you earlier, it had successfully put its ideology aside. So everybody respected Vajpayee as a leader. And even if there were fights, demands, counter demands, very few broke away. At one point, AIA-DMK broke away. At another point later, DMK broke away. Those were the troublesome parties for that NDA. That problem continued, but besides that, he was widely accepted as the leader. Next point, BJP's expansion was enabled by the formation and the strengthening of the NDA. So look at all the partners of the BJP. Barring one or two, barring maybe the Akali Dal, BJP expanded into the territory of every partner, including Shiv Sena. In Maharashtra, election after election, after the formation of the NDA, BJP grew in Maharashtra. BJP grew in Telangana, or what used to be combined Andhra then. In fact, it was then in partnership with TDP, which was a dominant party there, the main opposition to the Congress party, and vice versa. Sometimes TDP was up, sometimes Congress was up. In Andhra Pradesh, it grew in West Bengal, it also grew in Bihar because Samta Party and then JDU were its partners. So that was the fourth major outcome of the formation and rise of the NDA, that BJP was able to grow from being a north-centric party to being a genuinely pan-national party. Now, it's a bit challenging to say so exactly when the BJP has lost Karnataka, but the fact is that the BJP's foothold in Karnataka is very strong. It may or may not be in par. It is building a foothold already in Telangana. BJP seems to have already pushed the Congress aside as the main challenger to KCR's BRS. What used to be TRS is now BRS. So they have grown in many of these territories of their former partners, and they've become much more of a national party. At one point, they won a couple of seats in Tamil Nadu as well. At this point, they've become much more of a national party. Number five, NDA faced strains. The strains that NDA faced after Gujarat riots, some partners left on one pretext or the other, and some later regretted that they did not leave earlier because they realized that their Muslim vote left them. And they then suffered in the 2004 elections against Congress and its partners, or the so-called secular parties. So that also taught NDA a lesson and BJP a lesson, that there were limitations to how much further you could take ideology-free politics. And that's when we know that for 10 years, as it stayed out of power, the NDA became weaker and weaker. It did even more poorly, very poorly in the 2009 general elections. So its older leadership then faded away, and Amit Shah became party president in 2014. Narendra Modi as prime minister, the party completely changed, and by this time the party did not particularly need its NDA partners. That became a kind of excess baggage. Now look at 2014 elections. 2014, NDA came to power and BJP got a full majority. So BJP got 282, NDA got a total of 336. Again, I will give you the few broad numbers of the major constituents of NDA. BJP got 282 by itself, so that is a comfortable majority. 10 plus the majority mark, the famous 272. So it's 282. TDP got 16. Shiv Sena got 18. Lok Janshakti Party, that is Ramvilas Paswan's party, 6. Shiromani Akali Dal 4, Apna Dal from Uttar Pradesh 2, INLD. Even INLD, the Chautala family party, was a partner of NDA then. They got 2. So if you add them all up, it came to 336. Now that number in 2019 in fact became 355 seats, but there is a subtle difference, or maybe not such a subtle difference, that while the overall numbers went up by 17, these also went up because BJP's own numbers went up by 21. So BJP came to 303. Does that number ring a bell? Think for a moment, right? I just mentioned that number. But anyway, this number 303 is exactly the number that NDA won. All of NDA together won in the second election that it fought together. That is the 99 election in 1999 fall. After the fall of that one-year government of Vajpayee, when they came back and fought another election after the war in Kargil, victorious, that NDA got 303. In 2019, BJP itself got the same number, 303. And you can imagine what might have followed. What followed then was that the BJP's dependence on its NDA partners declined. As BJP's dependence on its NDA partners declined, and as NDA partners also began worrying that the BJP was now very powerful, they had a very popular leader, and they were growing into their territories. That's when the centrifugal pressures within the NDA built in, and that's when many partners of the NDA left the alliance. And that's why NDA might have won 355 seats, but today NDA is down to 329 seats or 313 seats, depending on how you count it. Why the difference? The difference is how do you count the Shiv Sena numbers. The Shiv Sena MPs, 18, generally it's believed 13 are with Shinde Shiv Sena, 5 are with the other Shiv Sena. How do you count them? So if you count bulk of them with the BJP, then the number is 329. Otherwise, the number can be 313, of which the BJP has 302. It had 303. Then one by-election it lost subsequently, so it has 302 now. So this is the case right now of long-live National Democratic Alliance, but that National Democratic Alliance is dead. It was an idea whose time had come in 1998, but it also had a limited half-life. So I would say that it lived out its half-life by 2004, and once it lost power, it began to lose it even faster. So half-life periods became even shorter. After 2004 came 2009, then 2014, and once the BJP won majority by itself, then the idea of trading space or sharing power or conceding demands of the partners, etc., became irrelevant to the BJP. So right now, BJP has many partners. You can see on your screen the current list of NDA partners. It's about 27 parties, of which many parties don't have any MPs in Lok Sabha. So they are partners. Naam ka vaste, maybe in their respective states they count for something, particularly in the northeast. Again, if you look at the map of India, BJP and its partners now have 15 states. But BJP's dependence on its NDA partners is now very limited. Maybe Maharashtra, right? Bihar has now gone away. And then essentially the smaller northeastern states. In Assam also, while it has partners, it has a majority of its own. So you can see the spectacular history and spectacular evolution of Indian politics by looking at the founding and the rise and then the decline of NDA. And the decline of NDA has coincided perfectly with the rise of the BJP and Narendra Modi, and that's a very logical thing in politics. So any description or any adjective you might use for our politics, one thing you cannot call it is illogical.